everyone, welcome back to part 5 of the Make Money Writing series. Today we are talking about script writing, and as content writers, yes, you can offer script writing as a writing service. No, I'm not talking about the usual movie script or TV serial script. Here today we are going to talk about two types of scripts that you can offer as a content writer and that are really in demand, so that will help you to understand what it is, how you can write them, and how you can offer them as a service, and most importantly, who are the people who will hire you for this writing service. So when we are talking about script writing, there are two types of format for which you can offer script writing as a service. When I started my freelance writing career in 2020, I landed my first client in 2021, and the second client that I got was in February. So for that project, I was hired as a script writer. I was writing podcast scripts for that client. So yes, it is very much a writing service that you can offer. And the second type of scripts are video scripts. So video scripts, this include all the different mediums, all the different channels that are out there that have video as their communication channel, whether that's YouTube, whether that is long form video or short form video, whether that's a webinar or a workshop. All of these are different types of video formats that are out there, popular in the marketing strategy of any business, whether that's a proper agency or a personal brand, a small business or an intermediate level business. All of them today are using video in their marketing strategy. So you as a content writer can come in and pitch in your writing services as a script writer. You can help them develop the entire video scripts from scratch, and you can get paid for it. So first of all, let's talk about the very first kind that I mentioned, which is podcast. So podcasts have recently gained all the momentum, and they have become very popular among the masses as a source of content consumption. Along with all the written ways, along with all the visual ways, audio format has been a very important part of content consumption. Therefore podcasts have become a very popular marketing strategy in the past few years. So like I said, I offered it as a service in the initial days of my journey. How you can do is that there are companies who hire people to do the podcast for them. They hire people as their host, and they hire people to write those podcast scripts for them. Now when we say podcast scripts, I am not asking you to go very rigid with your scripts, and because podcasts, they're supposed to be informal conversations, they're supposed to be authentic raw conversations where either the host or the guest or the interviewer, whoever it is that is doing the podcast, they're supposed to be natural with the way they're talking, with the way they're explaining everything. So as podcast scripts writers, you are not hired to write word to word, though in some cases you can do that, but more often than not, you are hired to write a content outline for the podcast script. So how does that works is that some influencers or the people who are running their podcast, either they will hire you to do a word to word podcast script for them, or they will hire you as both a strategist and a writer, where you can help them navigate the content for the podcast for that particular episode. So how do you do that? Now I don't know how many of you hear podcasts, but I have been listening to quite a few of them recently. One of my favorite is Manifestation Babe by Catherine Zankina. So if you would go and hear that one, you would see a flow in that podcast. It starts with the music, then there's some welcome message, or if there's a guest, then she would introduce the guest. Then there is message from the sponsors. So if the podcast is being sponsored by anybody, then they would highlight that within the introduction of the podcast, and then starts the main body of the podcast. This is where you come in as a content writer. You can help influencers or podcasters navigate their entire body of content as a content writer. Why? Because you can help them strategize the content. You can, just like you write blogs, you can do that with the podcast as well, but blogs are more written in a more detailed format. Even the content outline is very, very detailed, but when it comes to podcast, you are writing the script in a very brief manner. Why? Because you don't want the podcaster to follow the word to word format, because then it takes away from the authenticity of the podcast. And B, you're just helping them to stay on track with what they have planned for their podcast. You don't not want them to get distracted from the topic of the podcast, which is why it is very, very important that you as a content writer help them strategize it. You help them navigate the body of the content for the podcast, and then by the end of it, just like any other content piece out there, audio, visual, written, any of that, you conclude the podcast as well with a clear CTA, with a clear call to action. So now there are 4 types of podcast scripts that I have in front of them that you can write as a content writer. One of them is minimalist. Minimalist, as the name suggests, it's very simple. You begin with an introduction, you go to directly the body of the content, and you end with a CTA. Then there's a solo show. Solo show is like most podcasts begin with. They the host, they go on with their journey or whatever the topic of the podcast of that episode is, they would go on with that, and you as a content writer can help them with the entire strategy, with the entire body of content as the writer. Third is interviews. So when a podcaster is doing the interviews, here you can come in as, you can play very different roles other than just writing the podcast script. You can have you can research about the guest, whoever it is that is coming on the platform. You can prepare questions for the podcaster to ask the guest. Third, you can help them with the entire, again, the script. And fourth, you can help them with the strategy of how the flow of the podcast episode will go. And now, the fourth type of podcast is word for word script. This is what I essentially worked on when I was working with the client. So my project was for a health and wellness podcast, and it required a lot of medical information. So again, my job as the content writer, as a script writer there, was to research everything, to research all the medical nuances of that podcast, and to research all the medical terms, or all the health and wellness information that was needed for that podcast. So again, like I said, podcast scripts are very much in demand. If you find a big podcaster, you can pitch in your services and you can help them create and strategize and basically plan the entire episode of a podcast. Now, the second one that we talked about is video scripts. So like I said, whether it's YouTube long form video, whether it's YouTube shorts, whether it's Instagram reels, whether it's any other video content format like a workshop or a webinar or a video course, there are so many different ways in which video consumption has come into the marketing strategy for any business. So again, as a content writer, you can offer that as a service. Now, how do you write these video scripts? Because I've been doing that for 2 months for my own video content now, I know that you, first of all, you need to be thorough. You need to be very sure of who are the people that you are writing for. So you need to identify your audience. Second, you need to set a goal for that video. You cannot talk about all the different things in one video. One particular video has to talk about one particular thing. For example, in this video, we are sticking to script writing. Even though there are so many other things, I am not deviating from the topic. So as a content writer, you have to do that as well. You have to make sure that your person, the influencer, your client is focused on one particular topic for one particular video. Now, the third point is storytelling. I cannot emphasize it enough. While this is majorly for the person who is sitting in front of the camera, but storytelling is so important for the video content as well. Just like I told the story of how I got my client, it would have sparked some kind of relatability for you, and you will be thinking, okay, she has done it, this means that there is a demand for the writing service, for the script writing service in the market. So storytelling is very important. Now as a writer, either you can completely draft that story for them, or you can completely take the control to create a whole story for them, or you can ask and sit with your client and you can get stories out of them, and then you can include them in the script for that particular video. Now the next part is creating your content around those storytelling, around those characters. So for example, in my case, when I was telling the story of writing a podcast script for a client, I was the main character because I was the service provider here. So this is a real story, this is something that has happened with me, hence it establishes me as an authenticity, it establishes me as an authoritative person. So when you are offering script writing as a service for your client, it is your duty as a service provider to get those stories out of your clients, to sit with your client and ask those stories from them and get them to share their experiences with you. And then it is your job as a content writer to weave those stories and to tell their story into that script. And now the final part is segmenting that script into sections. For example, as you would have seen in this video, I had a brief introduction, then we moved on to podcast scripts, and then we moved on to video scripts, and then I will conclude it. So similarly, you have to segment your script based on the discussion and the needs that your client has. So again, even if you are offering your services as a script writer, it is a team game here. You cannot offer these services alone until and unless it is a very general topic and it is something that required research from your end. It is a two-way street, and you will have to include your client to give them their personal stories, their personal experiences to you, so that you can weave those stories around their incidents, around their experiences, and to make this will add to the authenticity of the video creation. And finally, that last point, like I said, for every content piece out there, for the video scripts as well, you will conclude it with a CTA. For example, here I will ask you to subscribe to my channel, to like this video, to comment anything that you would want me to answer, or all of those things. Similarly, you have to end any video or any script for that matter with a clear call to action, so that your viewer or reader or listener, they know what they have to do next with your content. So this is how you can offer these services as a content writer, and this is everything that I wanted to share with you today. Now, like I mentioned, some other ways in which you can come in as a script writer is you can collaborate with influencers or course creators, and you can help them create their course, and you can help them with the entire content creation of their process. For example, last month I conducted my own blogging workshop, and I worked on it from A to Z. I created the entire content for it. But as a content writer, I have done that same thing for someone else as well. This was back in last year. I collaborated with a course creator. She was creating a course around emotional intelligence, and I created the entire course structure for her from scratch. So again, as a content writer, you can do this as well. So like I always say, there are so many ways in which you can leverage your writing skills, and you can embark on your content writing journey with what feels the most right for you. I hope this fifth part of this entire series gave you some new perspective on what you can do as a content writer, and we have 10 more parts to go. So in every part, I will be sharing something new with you so that you can offer it as a service for your content writing journey. And with that, I hope you enjoyed everything that I just shared with you. I hope you learned something new with this video, and I will see you in the next video with something new. Until then, keep writing, keep practicing, and thank you for watching.